Well, opposition parties have addressed the media in Johannesburg, reporting back on how the DA coalition is faring. The budget and their plans for next year, they reiterated their threat to the ANC that coalition politics are the country's new normal, and they are ready to take over the reins from the governing party at national level. But will it be that simple? Well, our resident political analyst, Professor Sipho Seepe, joins us to unpack this. A very good morning to you, Prof. As always, thank you for joining us.
Good morning.
Well, two questions. What did you find to be the point, really, of this press conference that we saw yesterday? And we heard the coalition partners speaking on the virtues of multi-party rule ahead of the 2019 elections. Let's talk about those virtues.
Well, first of all, the idea is to strike the mind of the voters that it is possible to defeat the ANC. Remember, there are some people who think democracy becomes entrenched when you can have one party that is in government being replaced by another. So with the municipal elections, people began to see a possibility where you could have opposition parties taking over some form of government. Now what they are doing is to eye the national government. And so the whole idea is to say it is possible to the voters. And it should also be a wake-up call for the ANC, because my sense of the ANC right now is that even though it is rooted in the political struggle of black people and aspiration of black people, there's a sense that it is now business-led, it is media-led, it also begins to show a particular class bias towards the elite. So the opposition parties will try to exploit that. But I think also we are making too much around the notion of differences of the political parties, because if you look at these opposition parties, a number of them are offshoots of the ANC. And effectively what it means, because the ANC has styled itself as a multi-class and multi-ideological, it is very easy for parties to really work together. I mean, I don't think the differences have been so major. If you look at the coalitions that have occurred, UDM's anger is not so much ideological with DA. It's more about the arrogance of the DA. Right. So the differences are too minor. I think parties tend to gravitate to what the voters want. They all try to appeal to the same voters, and any party must address those. This is why you find that most parties tend to move towards the center, because that's where the people are. Yeah. So, but I think the whole exercise of yesterday was simply to psych the people around this possibility.
Now, you know, you talk about the fact that these parties are eyeing a national government, and really this is said to be some kind of wake-up call to the ANC. You also seem to allude to the fact that the ANC has become more sort of elitist and speaking more to that kind of black person, that elite sort of black person. Is there a party that can realistically fill the gap of the forgotten people, the group of people that are perhaps in the villages, the poor? Is there, if you look at the DA, for example, or any of the other big political opposition parties, is there anyone really speaking to that group, that gap?
No, well, I mean, if you listen to the rhetoric of the EFF and why it was formed, and also the EFF has actually influenced the ANC. The whole notion of radical economic transformation is a language that started in the EFF or in the ANC Youth League when Malema was there. Once he was booted out, what the EFF was saying, that this party, the ANC, has done an excellent job in providing us with political liberation. But we don't think that it has wherewithal to take us to the next level of economic liberation, and hence the whole notion of radical economic transformation. Even the land issue was always uppermost within the EFF when it was formed. It appears as one of the cardinal principles that they were going to pursue. So you see the ANC beginning to realize that there is a new language that has actually come. Even there's the one of nationalization of mines and banks. That is a language that comes from the EFF. So whether the EFF has the capacity to carry that through is something else. But the rhetoric is very appealing. And when you look to the ANC, you hear a party that talks about the new mood, that talks about the new dawn. But that party does not talk about the daily protests that are taking place. So if you are an opposition party like the EFF, like the new parties like the Black, the PLF, this is a space where you try to move. You saw the ANC being unclear on the land issue. I mean, if you take the debacle around the Ngonyama Trust, the ANC was forced to buckle down, even though its position was fuzzy around what needs to happen. But once they realized that you have organizations like the BLF taking prime position, talking with the traditional leaders, you saw Contralesa, which used to be in the main camp of the ANC, finding common cause with EFF, or saying, we actually respect the EFF because it has not insulted us. The ANC was quiet. So there's right now there's a lot of possibility. But I think ultimately parties that will win will be those parties that will concern themselves with the experience of the majority. The ANC right now speaks investor-led what you call economic growth, and they are obsessed about the investors. The investors have become the new normal in the ANC. It is not the ordinary people who are protesting on a daily basis.
Now, you know, the DA has governed Johannesburg, Nelson Mandela Bay and Tshwane in this coalition with the ACDP, COPE, UDM, IFP and the FF Plus for almost 2 years. They highlighted their success in the 3 cities. What do you perceive to really be their successes as they, in your words, eye a national government? And I think on the back of that, the question of whether a coalition government is the future and realistic for South Africa in the South African context?
Well, I think, I'm not too sure that they can claim that they've been successful. I mean, if it depends who you're reading. If you read the people who vote, who are in the main black, look at the protests in Tshwane, look at the protest in Nelson Mandela, look at the protest in the Western Cape. If those protests are a measure of people's satisfaction, then you could say that those coalitions have not done any better than the ANC. But if you also listen to the language that is used by the DA around seeking voters, it doesn't say we have an ideological difference. They say where we govern, we do it better. And part of it is because all parties except the EFF subscribe to the NDP. But they also all subscribe to the Constitution. And their conducting government is also governed by legislation like the PFMA. So the whole issue where government gets embarrassed is when you find that there's irregular expenditure, where there's corruption, where there's fraud. Those are the issues that will make the voters angry. So it is a party that can show that we have a clean government. At least the people say these ones will take care of our resources. Then you move to the next level. Are you going to respond to issues of land? Are you going to respond to service delivery? And I don't think they have actually parties, the coalitions have done any better. Oh, the ANC must actually be piggybacking on the protest to say these guys, the claims of success are minimal. Yes, we can have a clean audit, but if that clean audit does not result in houses, if that clean audit does not result in predictable electricity, that is actually meaningless.
Well, you know, in closing, there was a bizarre turn of events when COPE leader Monsieur Lekota took the mic and then called for the establishment of refugee camps to deal with the flood of foreigners. What did you make of this? And I suppose a second question to that, is COPE losing more and more relevance? And what really is the future, if there is really, of COPE? We know that there are in this coalition, but are they really that influential at this point? Really?
Well, I think they have proved to be irrelevant. And actually, in one of the debates that I was part of with the Monsieur Lekota, he says when he was put in the corner, he says he's a member of the ANC, but not the Zuma ANC. So you can see that this is a party that was formed out of unhappiness.
And now that Zuma's out?
Now that he's out, he might gravitate. But in the whole picture, in the broader picture, I think the UDM, which speaks a very good language, which talks clean government, and the interventions are very good, but I don't think it has made any traction. I think the parties that have made a lot of traction will be the EFF, will be probably the PLF if it comes in, and it will be a Democratic Alliance. But the weakness of the ANC is that even though it is rooted in black aspiration, it is obsessed with attracting white people, and it will fail. It has always failed.
And why is that? Why is
because what the DA did was clever, was to consolidate the white vote, to make sure that white privilege is protected, and then to say, but we've reached a ceiling. What we needed is to get a black person to try to win black people. But the core of it is really to make sure that you don't destabilize those white interests, because those are your core voters. At the same time, the ANC is gradually abandoning black people by being overly concerned with what business people will think. Because even when you look at the resolutions of the ANC, you don't hear the president of the ANC talking a lot about those. What we hear is about the investors. The new god in the ANC that the ANC members must kneel to is investors. So that language, if the opposition begins to play their part, they could actually run with it.
Now, is South African politics moving more towards elitism? And why I say that is, you talk about the fact that the DA made sure that they entrenched themselves as being this white party that attracts the white voter. Are white and black interests still sort of divided, or is it become a case of it's the rich versus the poor than it is black versus white as it was previously? Where are we moving and navigating as South Africans?
I think what you find in the media is an attempt to create a reality that does not exist.
Yeah.
South Africa is still divided along racial lines. Even among the black professionals, you'll find that there are only a few. But because we always have colonized black people, what they will tend to do will be to proclaim this success. But if you look at numbers, you look at the people in management, you'll find black people constitute less than 10%. You look at ownership, the economy is still in white hands. You look at the income levels, white families, the income is 5 times that of black people. You look at the land. Actually, land is the greatest signifier. If you have 80% who are still forced to occupy about 20% of the land that is available, then you know that there is a crisis. And you don't have a party like the ANC that has a political courage to say, even if the Constitution allows it, we are going to take a position that we amend it in such a way that there's less ambiguity. Because what we know, as all parties accept, is judges can be bought. There are judges who look at issues based on their historical lens. I mean, if you take a case of the Constitutional Court on the matter that dealt with the streets, you found the black judges on the whole voting differently, and the 2 white judges are voting differently, simply to say we see things differently because we are all products of our own experiences. And there are also black judges who have never been part of the historical struggles of black people. And these are the people who start seeing things through white lenses. So the issues of race are still going to be with us. And the land is a signifier of disadvantage and privilege.
I'm going to take advantage of you. One last thing before you leave, and it's just because you raised it. We've always been praised as South Africa as having one of the best constitutions in the world, the most liberal constitution in the world. And now we're starting to see that it's not necessarily the best, because, I mean, it wouldn't need any kind of amendment if it was the best kind of constitution or piece of legislation in the world. Are you of the view that indeed our constitution is problematic, and that, I mean, now we're seeing Section 25 showing itself as being problematic? Will that lead to other pieces of that legislation having to be altered, and then us having to step back and go, well, we don't have that great a constitution after all?
Well, we need to understand that the constitution is a product of a compromise. What it means is that it was a document that came because of the balance of forces. And the balance of forces at that time is that the ANC knew it could not defeat the apartheid system. and therefore it had to find some accommodation. And they came up with the working document. And the constitutions are working document. And even this constitution anticipated that it will need to be changed in future, because if it does not address the people's concern, it must be changed. So I don't think the problem is the constitution not anticipating that. That's written. What the constitution has actually indicated that if there's going to be changes, this is how you go around those changes. So let's pack the constitution. Then the second thing is we need to understand that our approach to the constitution must have a healthy dose of skepticism and suspicion based on those balance of forces. We cannot allow ourselves to be frozen in 1994 when the balance of forces were different. And then when they change, you change according to that. So we see now, 24 years later, you have judges not agreeing even what the Constitution says.
Right.
You have clauses that are interpreted differently. And we must also have a healthy dose of suspicion to the judiciary, because they are also not people who are coming from heaven. These are ordinary people that have their own prejudices and biases. Right. So if we understand that, then we'll come up with an amendment that is very clear that this transition and transformation is incomplete for as long as being black means being poor, for as long as being black means being landless, for as long as being black means you carry the burden of health hazards, for as long as whenever there's winter, we know who are people who are likely to suffer. Yes. It will be black people. So the reality is out there, but this is a reality that the ANC does not want to talk about, because the ANC also has the burden of trying to say we've been very successful. It has been successful only in a sense of the sports fields and all that. But when it comes to the real economic space, we still have a long way to go. But in its defense, its decisions and resolutions of last year are the good pointers that all other parties that are black have adopted. But the ANC adopted the resolutions that it seems unable to put forward.
All right, Prof. Seepe, it's always a pleasure having you here in studio with us. Thank you very much for that insightful analysis. Of course, that's our conversation on that press conference between coalition parties that, of course, have been governing the 3 metropolitan cities. And, of course, it took that bizarre turn